Hello, everyone, and welcome again in your favorite of all the Kardamom and Chili podcast, which brings you quirkiness, happiness, and joy in the branding world and in creative world in general. And today we have another fabulous guest, Heike.
No, I'm not the guest.
No, I'm trying to get you into the conversation.
I know.
Our guest already, dear listeners, our guest already thinks, oh God, what have I done?
Yeah.
But that's okay. All right. So Heike, let's introduce the marvelous guest today.
Yes. So obviously I'm Heike. And I have brought or dragged rather Richard Hiron into our Kardamom and Chili podcast. And because he's a fabulous human being, he can be super funny, and he has a geeky side as well, and he covers employment law. So he does something very special, and he does it with very much heart and humanness. That's English language. Nice. And today you might be wondering what a branding coach and a photographer and an employment lawyer have to do with each other besides being awesome humans. We thought we'd talk about copyright. And please don't run away just yet, because this is very dear to our hearts, because we deal with it pretty much every time when we create something, when we do something. And so we thought we speak about this for once, because so far we've only spoken about our emotional sides of things and self-development and self-compassion and all these lovely things. And for once, it's going down a little bit the technical route. So Richard, welcome. And do you want to introduce yourself a little more?
Thank you very much, Heike and Vera. First off, I think you've given me perhaps the short straw out of all of the topics, all of the self-awareness. I would have loved them. Hello, everyone listening. My name is Richard Hiron. I'm known as the Hironator. And that is a story unto itself as to how that came about. But basically, I do employment law for a living. And one of the things that I specialize in and I'm very passionate about is keeping people out of the employment tribunal, helping to make them that little bit happier and to ensure that they can sleep well at night, not thinking, oh my God, there's this claim going on in the background that is stressing me out.
That's really interesting what you do. And I can tell that you're the one, you are passionate about it, which is also good, especially with stuff like law. It's good to have someone who's passionate about it.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
And who wants to do this by their own free will.
Yes, I've got a secret shackle around my neck that keeps me here.
Oh, lovely. All right, so just jump into the dive again.
Into the deep water?
Language. Yeah. Language today, it's playing, but all right. So straight away to the point, copyright, Richard. What we can tell about that?
Of course. So copyright, first off, is not something that you'd automatically come to an employment lawyer about. You would usually be looking for an intellectual property lawyer, a patent attorney, someone to register your designs, your trademarks, all those beautiful things that you've spent hours creating, designing, that you've invested all of that passion in. You'd take that to one of those people to begin with. And I do know a few. They're actually very nice people, the ones who I know. So they might be worth chasing up for your podcast as well. But the key thing for me with intellectual property, which is what we call trademarks, designs, copyright, all of those things, is ensuring that if you are a business and you take on employees or staff generally, that you have the right clauses in your contracts. Well, actually, no, I've jumped a bit. Firstly, that you have contracts with those people because they're entitled to them from day one or before when they start working either for or with you. The next thing is, if you're a very design-oriented business, you're going to want to protect your baby, basically. You're going to want to protect all of these things that you have been creating. And the best place to do that with your staff is in that contract. It's often done with more senior members of staff, but that is not to say that it can't be done with more junior members of staff who are doing the day-to-day work. So you might have a number of members of staff who are all feeding into this whole picture. So somebody's doing one element of something, another person is doing another element. I think really the idea of a video game is probably the best way to present that, because if you're boring like me and you've sat through the credits at the end of a video game, you will see all of these people who've done the soundtrack, the character design, the background, the world map, all of those kinds of things. And I guess having a perspective on copyright generally and looking at it in the finished form, it kind of gives you an appreciation that this is a team effort at the end of the day. But as we possibly know, the thing is that you can have very fractious relationships at work. And sometimes people leave of their own decision, or unfortunately, you might have to remove them from your business. But then what happens to all those beautiful things that they've created on your behalf? Can they take them to a competitor? Can they use them themselves? Can they sell them to somebody else? And those are the key things that you're going to want to prevent, dare I say, them doing in the future, because it's yours.
That is really interesting point.
I think it's the same for us who not yet have employees. We need to make sure that when we hire someone, a freelancer, that our copyrights are covered, that we have contracts which make sure that what we buy is ours at the end, or that we have the license, because that is something that Vera needs to make sure of with her photography. And although I would like to go a little bit beforehand and make, well, copyright as a designer and as someone who creates stuff is a huge thing. And so one of the things is that nearly everything that you find on the internet, that you find anywhere, is copyright protected or intellectual property. So when you grab a picture of the internet without paying for it, without having a license, without having it from a stock website, and without an attribution, for example, if it's free, you are doing copyright infringement. And that can be extremely expensive. Especially as a business owner, you always need to make sure that you cover your bum and do not steal the stuff from others. And so copyright is something that is not only in employment law or not only for the big companies. It starts with us, with ourselves, and even in the personal range as well already. Because, well, people who know me know that I'm a Dungeons and Dragons player. And there are a lot of beautiful art that you can have and draw from the internet for your personal use only. However, people use this and distribute it further and use it in their own copy of stuff when they create stories around Dungeons and Dragons. And that's already copyright infringement and can cost tens of thousands of pound, dollar, euro. It depends in which country that happens.
I'm really curious, Richard, out of curiosity and obviously your experience, how copyright and awareness of copyright is generally perceived around. Do you think that people do have awareness? Do you think that people really know, or they just freely jumping into the jungle of internet and do whatever they feel like doing?
That's a very interesting question, Vera. I think the answer is a bit of both. So sometimes well, not just me, I have seen people posting on LinkedIn, for example, about Lego, and that's a really popular one. But when you think about a piece of Lego, whether it's a brick of Lego or a finished product, it's still somebody else's creation, though you physically pieced it together. Then you come along, you post it on LinkedIn thinking this will get really good engagement. And the trouble is with that, you are showcasing somebody else's product. Whatever way you decide to fix it together, the argument could be that's somebody else's creation, and you're just the hands at the end of it who have put it together. But the argument on the other side could well be, could Lego really, let's say that I took a piece of Lego, I pieced it together in a way that the craziest person in the world possibly wouldn't have thought to put it together.
Mhm.
Do I then own the rights in that way of piecing a piece of Lego together, or do Lego still own it? And I think that is the really interesting point, because that's where the fine line of infringement and lawful behavior come in.
Mm-hmm.
So just returning to my original kind of answer, I think, yes, there is understanding of copyright infringement. I'm not sure if there is understanding of using somebody else's product, because that's what it is at the end of the day. Both the finished article and the pieces that kind of make up that article, it's kind of like, is there an understanding that using somebody else's product might get you in trouble? So I think there are two very distinct points there. The copyright infringement is generally understood.
Mm-hmm.
What could be copyright infringement? Not necessarily.
Fascinating, actually, especially these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another thought, Vera, we have talked about it as well before, not on the podcast though. You as a photographer, you have also a very special reliability towards anything that you create and towards the clients. So tell us a little bit about the difference that you have between the licensed photos, where people buy the license, and the photo shoot that you do on a normal basis.
That's quite interesting topic as well, because people really not realize that hiring professional photographer gives them ownership of that photographs, because the photographs which I create for people, they license for them. I still, in my contract, I still keep my copyrights, and they can't make really weird use of photographs, and that's protecting me to not be assigned with really ridiculous things. But they do hiring, they do buy license to use them. And that's what is a benefit of hiring professional photographer, one of the benefits. And actually people have right to use photographs for themselves. And I feel like very often no one really thinks about it at all.
But that's exactly the reason why there are stock platforms out there, like Adobe Stock. They are really expensive, but the reason behind it that it is professional photographers who do the creative work, and you can license it properly so you can use it anywhere. And you always need to check the licenses, because there are standard licenses, extended licenses, premium, blah, 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 blah. There is a lot of that out there. And some are editorial use only, which then is another class, and they are really, really expensive. But that is because of the copyright and the intellectual property behind everything that someone else creates. And coming back to the Lego, because I have a deeper insight in that, because I have worked for Lego at a point, the copyright there is when you create something out of Lego, Lego promotes the have fun, play attitude. So when you create a new spaceship that you showcase online and it's your idea, you are not allowed to use, well, it's a fair policy use of stuff. However, where it's really bad is when people just choose the colors and their name as a logo and make it look like Lego logo. That is copyright infringement and can cost really a lot of money, because Lego is big. You need to keep it in mind. You're not allowed to replicate the minifigure heads as a logo. You're not allowed to take the colors. You're not allowed to take the font. It is all copyright infringement. And that, by the way, is valid for every single brand you see out there. You are not allowed to copy that logo. And so Lego is a great example because it is a toy company and it has, on the corporate side, distinction that the logo needs to be protected and the minifigures are protected and all these things. So you're not allowed to do anything with it. If you're playing with it and have fun and do not make profit and you just want to share with Lego fans what you created, that is okay because you're also crediting Lego at that moment automatically. And it's marketing for them as well. Mm-hmm. But you really need to be careful what you do. And also, well, there's a lot more to it, which brings me into my branding, marketing, graphic design background. So I'm better shutting up now. But yeah, be careful what you do. And for those who want to have a look at Richard's LinkedIn profile, he's a huge movie fan. And he always writes brilliant posts that everyone can understand, which is fabulous because there are so far not many lawyers who speak human, understandable human that I met. And he always refers to movies and takes examples from that. But there is something more to it in terms of copyright. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Richard?
Yes, of course. Thank you for mentioning them. It's made me blush a bit, but but thank you. I don't usually get those compliments about speaking like a human being.
Oh, come on.
Well, the thing with this is I'm fortunate enough that when I was at university, I did do copyright law as basically one of my electives. And there is something in there called fair comment, which is a potential defense to copyright infringement. Now, naturally, the law will have moved on since I was at university, a decade ago. And it's one of those things of just trying to keep up with those kinds of things. So that's the boring law side. The human side of it is that with those posts, I never seek to sell my services. That sounds dreadful, actually, saying it that way. But that's not what I seek to do. It's to raise awareness, and therefore that fair comment. A number of people actually say to me that I will have quoted something from a film, which I credit to the film because it's not my property, and twist it in a way where there's an employment law or an HR perspective on it, like recruitment, the need to get a contract. But the key thing to it is it's raising awareness. It's not selling me or what I do, even though I'm known for it. It is bringing that awareness in so that people think, oh God, I've got to get a contract. I might go to my employment lawyer. Might be me, might not be me. But it's a way of kind of creating that memorability, but also informing and educating people in a way that's fun.
It is, especially as you have a very lovely movie taste, as I find. So, yeah.
Thank you. Not everyone agrees, but
I know.
yeah. I can't say I will watch anything once. I have seen clips of Star Wars, and I know we might potentially disagree on this. It's one of the few times we disagree. I'm not tempted to go and watch the films at all from those clips, but
a stab in my heart.
I'm sorry, but I do respect people who enjoy Star Wars, Star Trek, all of those things. So I know I'm about a week late, but may the 4th be with you.
Thank you very much. But the stab still sits. No, I'm just kidding. I might be the super geek, but we have been talking about other movies as well, especially James Bond and all the oldies from the 60s and 70s. And yeah, so I'm not fixated on Star Wars and Star Trek, and Star Trek is better anyways. And
Don't go there. Don't go there
Someone
unless
has
you
just
want
gotten a heart attack
have-
listening to this.
have a really
How dare you?
No, not me, because personally I just don't tell anyone. I just prefer Star Wars. But anyway, so
What? I didn't know that.
here we go. That's the friendship on the fine line.
Yeah,
now.
we never talk about it. You know,
we should speak to Richard before and sign some agreements. No,
yeah.
in the event of disclosure, things we are not agree on. Da da da.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, you know, usually people don't talk about religion and money and politics, and there is an unwritten law between other people that they never talk about Star Wars and Star Trek or something like this, because it could cause something really bad. I find this so funny.
Oh, well. But yeah, you, from what we can hear, you really put together interesting two things, law and love for movies. That's really exciting. And I'm looking forward to read more about it as well.
Thank you. That's really kind of you, Vera.
Is there something you would give a simple advice to people regarding to copyright, or what they need to pay attention for, or what's the easiest way to, befriend the subject?
Yeah, I think the key thing is to always know your motives when you're going into it. That one slip, I mean, the very good example recently, actually, the Ed Sheeran song that was actually, I think there was actually a case going on. I didn't keep a very close eye on it, but there was a melody in that song where the estate of Marvin Gaye was basically saying, "You've stolen this song," and then it was all wrapped up this week, I think, or late last week, where basically they were saying, no, there is nothing similar between these two songs. The lyrics are different, words are different. You've just happened to use this tiny little piece which anybody could access. It's available to anyone who can play an instrument. So I think it's knowing your boundaries, knowing why you're doing something, but also bearing in mind that these kinds of things can creep up on you very unexpectedly, and you could get that letter through the door, or more realistically by email, saying, "You've breached our copyright." These things can literally lead on for years, not necessarily weeks or months, actual years. So it is important to make sure that if you're using somebody else's property, you credit them appropriately for it.
That is a good point. That's a good point. I'm just thinking about, the all possibilities of finding my photographs everywhere and asking people if they really extend license properly.
I mean, that's another point. I'm working with someone who is an accessibility web designer, so to make websites accessible. In order to do this for screen readers and all these helpful tools and apps for people who are hearing impaired and visually impaired, there is something, when I built my first website, because I showcased all that I had designed, I had taken away the possibility for people to right-click and download. I had disabled everything, so my stuff can't be stolen easily. Because everything that crawls the internet, especially AIs now that create other stuff, they copyright infringe all the time. They are AIs. They don't give a, about where the stuff comes from. They just take it and make something similar out of it, or just take it. However, this disabling of the download function of the right click also disabled the alt texts, which make other people, or which enable other people to understand your website, and all these other things. So copyright touches into so many areas of our lives, what we do and how we try to protect us, and especially as a creative, that you don't want your content showing up everywhere, anywhere, and so that people can just take it and make money out of it and you'll get nothing. There is really a fine line you have to be aware of so many things with it. On one hand, you want to have the accessibility, but you can't have it because you want to copyright your stuff. You want to make sure that people can see your stuff, but then you need to be scared of people trying to steal your stuff and all these things. And that's, for example, another thing on YouTube. When you publish a video, you can disable a function that enables others to take your content and make their own content out of it. And that is something I always make sure is disabled, because I do not want someone to take my content and make some weird stuff out of it. And we all have seen videos where other people, what is it called? Defame? When they diminish the work and make fun of them only because they had a funny face in that moment or a funny noise that they made. And so no matter what we do as business owners or as people who are creatives or go into roles that are producing things, we need to make sure that we cover everything that we can and that we do not break the law as best as we can.
Yeah. I think you've raised a very interesting point, because as small business owners, which we all are, we are also, if we are essentially promoting ourselves on social media in any form, we are all creators.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's why I always encourage everyone in branding, not only because of visibility, but also because of the copyright, to put their logo on their creations. Because it's, of course, with Photoshop nowadays and other tools, it is very easy to manipulate stuff. But when you always brand something, when you always put your stuff out there, you don't only build the know, like, and trust factor, but you also make sure that this quote you just put out, which you said, or your idea that you had for a post, that this is protected to an extent that it makes people think about what they do. As soon as you put a label on something, people stop and look more into their own actions. When they see something for free, they just take it. So it's this psychology behind it. As soon as you have a stamp on something or the logo, seeing it as a label, people will not as easily take your stuff and just post it on Facebook and look at this was me, and I've seen such stuff on Facebook quite a lot lately again.
Well, that's I think that's another story with Facebook, because actually people need to remember that whatever they put there, it's actually becoming Facebook property in some sense. There is some closure which allow them to use it. And you mentioned artificial intelligence, and that's going to be even more interesting in the law perspective, because I don't think, Richard, do you know something about that? It's law even trying to keep up with that, because that's going to be huge new thing.
It is, absolutely. I used it recently. I've only used it once, believe it or not. And I just asked it to write a post for me about an area that I'm involved in quite a bit called settlement agreements. And I read it, and it was very, I wouldn't say dry, it was very to the point. It was a very good post. But I thought, it's just does not sound like me. So even if I had used it, which I didn't, I had to go in there and, for my own sensibilities, change it. So again, we're straying far from employment law, but really in terms of chat GPT and things like that, who owns it? I would say, so you've gone in and asked it to do a specific thing, but it has gone and done all of the work, even if that work took seconds. So it's arguable that that thing that you have asked it to do, which you have posted on the internet, is its property. Creator of ChatGPT, their property, not yours. So it's it's definitely something to be very careful of. Yes, it can be a very good tool, but I think differentiate it, personalize it more so than not, because people can recognize when something is not your voice, whether they've met you or not. They will either meet you and then realize, oh, all of your stuff on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram is very robotic. You're not that person. I don't know how to feel around you. Whereas if, as I've been told, I use a very personal touch, if I throw my sense of humor in there, people know that it's me. They don't think, oh, you're very different to how you are online. They're thinking, oh my God, I already know you.
That even goes deeper, because I tested some AIs that came out for copywriting. And someone taught me, when I used Jasper to check on plagiarism,
Yes.
websites and they are for free, where this AI got its texts from. And I tested Google Bard lately and even made a post about it. And this AI that they are developing stole texts word by word from LinkedIn, from other people's content. So even if it does not sound like you, the underlying thing is, and the high risk is, that it has been taken directly from LinkedIn, from another Google post, from another website, word by word. And maybe there are only 2-3 words changed by the AI, but that does not mean it's not copyright infringement. So using AIs is really a dangerous thing when you do not do your duty and check for plagiarism.
Yeah, that's why I actually raised that question, because, the thing is, artificial intelligence, stealing or taking information from everything which is available in internet. And like for myself, like for photography, you could create great art. But again, the question is it your art? Or is it like combination of thousands of photographs you feed the artificial intelligence? Should that be like that? And I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I don't know, really. But is it new, I don't know, parts of creation? And then we accept that is, combination of millions other creations, and where is copyright here? Or people should start, telling, okay, that was created by actually artificial intelligence.
But they have a waiver. That's the problem. As soon as you use this, there is, yes, and I admitted a TNC reader, and also, when the movie is over, I sometimes read it as well. That's the geeky side in me. No, when you look at the usage of those websites, there is a waiver in it that ChatGPT doesn't take any responsibility for what comes out of their AI, for example. Basically, in very human words, instead of this weird, like, what does this mean? So you need to be really careful, because they just provide a platform for you to use, and you are responsible for what you make out of this stuff that it spits out.
That's back to what you, Richard, said for some point, isn't it? That actually your motives are sometimes really saving or put you into the trouble in the copyrights.
Well, for example, when you were saying, Heike, about putting your logo on things, when I do my posts based on films and books, I deliberately would not put my logo, if I had one, on those, because people could very easily become confused and think, this is your property, isn't it? Oh, back in 2000 and whatever, you went and made a film. And it's kind of like, no, this is not mine. I'm just using this to make a complex point easier. So kind of like, shall we say, a journalist, you're going out there and you're putting your spin on events. You're doing a kind of fair comment. It's called that for a reason, because you are literally putting something that has happened elsewhere and saying, this is my perspective on it.
That's actually a good point, because I should have elaborated more on that. My brain was fixed on when you put out your own quotes, when you put out your, titles of what you have been doing or when you have created something. It's absolutely true that when you have something like, you would not be allowed, coming back to the Lego, you would not be allowed to put the Lego logo onto that post, for example, or it actually is very difficult and very, as I always love to say, spongy, because it is like, lots of holes and squishy, and you have absolutely no clue where you're going with it.
Absolutely. And another point, it can be the tiniest little things. So another thing with my posts is that when you look at them, there is a clear difference. So the ones where I receive feedback, for example, or where I am asking a question that my intended client might be asking, I use my brand colors on that because that is what I'm doing. Again, coming back to the film posts, I don't throw anything like that in there because it isn't my property and I don't want it to be perceived as mine at all.
Yeah.
That's a good point, actually. That's a nice, easy way to get them separated a little bit for your own safety.
Just a little postscript on that point, but also for the protection of the person or people who created it in the first place, because it is theirs.
Totally. I like that. And that's also proving my point when I talk to people regarding photography, regarding bespoke photography. That's another really easy way to protect yourself. Because when we create something for people to promote their business, and that's theirs, they paid for it, they've got a license to use it on a majority of social media, their websites. I think that I'm not giving people a license to the billboards. So if that's disclaimer, if some of my customers will print themselves on the big billboards, they will pay more. The end of the disclaimer. So yeah, it's just that. So that gives them peace of mind because that's theirs and they don't need to really think about it. Did they steal it? Do they have a copyright? What's happening? It's just a pointer.
It's always very nice, I think. So say, for example, that you did a headshot of a professional, they go and use it on LinkedIn, all their social media, their websites. I think it's often nice. I say nice, but there's also the technical argument of whether a person has to do it or a business has to do it, of actually crediting the photographer, because even though the person basically has their image on their profile, it's somebody else who's actually taken the photo. So to have something saying this photo was taken by Vera, to basically say, to cover off that point, but also, I guess maybe I'm talking more as a human being than as a lawyer. Sorry, those two, I wonder whether they go together sometimes. But it's just not the ability to credit somebody to actually say, this is another business owner who's helped me on my journey. So in my website, on my LinkedIn profile, when I'm sharing this new photo of myself, this photo was taken by Vera.
But you're right. It's just that's another human touch to add. Plus, yeah, if you, what I encourage people to do as well, if you decide go for professional photography and invest, make it an event. Be happy, be proud, and yeah, that's your 1 or 2 posts sorted for your weekly posts schedule. You can do that, but you don't have to. So that's really up to you, because at the end of the day, when you're paying for it, you've got the license and you don't have to credit photographer for that. If you do, it's a very nice touch, as you said. Oh well, thank you very much, Richard, for making copyright law not that scary as some people may think.
I hope so.
It's really nice to hear from someone who could explain why it's important to look at these things and talk to an expert if we are not sure. And I really feel that you've done that today. And I believe that we all can learn something from today's episode.
And that law doesn't need to be dry and boring
Mhm.
and can be human.
Mhm.
We try. But thank you.
Thank you so much for trying. Thank you so much for bringing your lovely personality to today's episode. And all the best. And I'm looking forward to read more of your posts and learn more about films and law.
That's really kind of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.